G'day guys, look, I just want to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about the Sony FS5, which is my current A cam setup. A lot of the accessories that I've got on here I've bought to make it a whole different setup. So I was going to go through the different accessories that I've got for the moment. So I've got the small rig base plate with the rails, and this is essentially, it helps build any accessories that you want on top of this. As you can see, I've also got a twist arm at the back here, which is holding the Cmos Shogun. I'll go into depth with that a little bit later on. Now, up here, a lot of you will realize that when you're using your FS5, the viewfinder is a little bit hard to, get a proper angle on sometimes. Yes, it is very versatile that you can put it in all different places on the camera, but having this extension arm gives you a lot more length on there. And when you are using it shoulder mounted, it makes a whole world of a difference, which obviously leads down to the small rig shoulder mount as well. Now, if I do spin this around, you can see I have got a land part extension arm on here. This is purely for shoulder mount usage. Now, as you can see, the hand grip usually sits on the side of the camera. I've actually moved it down here to the end of the extension arm. When this essentially turns it into the feel of an FS7, which is designed for a shoulder mount camera, whereas the FS5 is designed for a handheld usage. Now this essentially, again, it just changes the way that you can stabilize the camera when you are run and gun. And you also got a lot of gear on here as well with lenses and microphones. It all adds up on the weight, so having it on the shoulder is really helpful. As you can see up here, I've got the Rode Ntg-2 shotgun mic. Now this is great for picking up any ambient noise, as well as any spare of the moment piece to cameras where someone doesn't have a lavalier mic on. Which then leads me to the Rode wireless Filmmaker Kit that I've got here. We've got two of them altogether. I'm using one at the moment, which is on the Alpha A6300. And we've also got one that always set up on here as well for any piece to cameras, any interviews and whatnot. Now, I've set this camera up for versatility. I can literally take it off the tripod, shoulder mount, and off I go. And it is very minimalist for that reason. So I just want to go through a couple of the features within the camera, not the accessories, but just within the camera itself. A lot of you may be looking to buy an FS5, and some of these features I just want to touch on real quick and just give you a quick insight. Twin SD card slots. Now this is great, you can continuously record, it goes directly to the next one. And unlike the FS7, they're SD cards, not XQD cards, where you're nearly paying $1,000 for the memory card. These you can pick up at any camera store and they're affordable, they're just really easy to work with. Moving forward, you've got the ND filter. Now a typical ND filter, you've got your different stops, but this has got a variable ND filter. This is next level. I can't tell you how many times I've used it. And now that it's actually got an auto ND filter, it takes filming to the next level. Now up the front here, inside the camera, we do have the Super 35 Cmos Sensor. This is the exact sensor as the Sony FS7. Gives you an absolutely great image. However, it is just in a smaller package as opposed to the FS7 where you're going to pay an extra couple of grand. So this joins onto the E-mount lens mounting system. You do have the Sony range of E-mount lenses, but you can also use a Metabones adapter to use Canon, Nikon, any other sort of manufacturer's glass. Obviously check with that manufacturer to whether autofocus will work, but apart from that, it is a very versatile mounting system. You do have the handle grip at the top as well. Now this can be totally removed, essentially turning the camera into the very, very minimalist you can have. Now, as you can see here, this is the FS5 in its bare bones, nothing attached onto it, yet you still got the full 4K capability and the use of all the functions. Now, slow motion is something that every filmmaker wants to use. It's smooth, it just looks good to the eye, and it shows you all the fine details that we've spent all these years perfecting. In the FS5, you do have 240 frames per second if you're shooting in NTSC. If you're shooting at PAL, you've got 200 frames a second. That's at 1080p. If you want to go up higher to 900 frames a second, you do lose your resolution. Now, the battery life on this camera is great. I've got the BPU 60s, which is the middle ground between the 30s and the 90s. And for me, I can shoot pretty much all of the day and I will have just about used all the battery. So for me, that is a big win on the FS5. And the last thing I just want to quickly touch on is the handle. Now the handle usually would sit up here if you just have the bare bones set up, but it has got all the functions. You've got customizable buttons, you got your zoom rocker, and you can twist it backwards and forwards and locks into place. This gives you the option to use a high up shot as well as a low down shot, and just any sort of different thing that you couldn't get with a larger camera like the FS7. Now, a lot of people ask me why I have such a setup like this. Now, it's all due to the way I use my camera. Most of the time it is on the tripod or a slider or even on the DJI Ronin M gimbal. But for me, the setup that I've got here is my 99% of the time shooting. I do have the Shogun on the back, which I have got mainly for the RAW upgrade. This allows me to get 4K ProRes at 60 frames a second, which you're not able to get within the camera. And it just allows you to get that 4K slow-mo as well, and continuous slow-mo at 1080p or at 2K. And it records to the SSD, which is by far one of the most reliable sources of storing media, and it's quick. Now on the screen, you can see all different sorts of information. You've got your waveforms, you've got your vector scopes, but it does have Atom HDR, which takes filming to a whole new level when you're shooting in S-Log and in RAW. So for me, this is a must if you're trying to get high quality footage out of the FS5. Picture profiles change every single day for me. Most of the time I use S-Log2 or S-Log3, and that's mainly because I've got the monitor and external recorder to get the most out of those images. It does have built-in LUT application, so you can put a LUT inside the machine. It will then output the image to the SSD, or even just display it only with the LUT applied. Now, as I did mention before, everything can be dismantled from this, which means it's a great camera for putting on drones. You can put it on a Ronin. It is great for putting on a car if you've got the essential mounts. Again, versatility for this camera is just great. Now, why would you buy an FS5? For me, this camera has got everything in one package. It's got all the features that you want. I've used mirrorless DSLRs like the A7S, the Alpha 6300. I've also used FS7, F55. For me, this is the perfect camera. It's an all-rounder, it's a run and gun, and it's just really, really good. Now, there's a couple of things that I would really like to see on this camera, which is why I've got the accessories that I do. Now, the viewfinder, I wish it had a loop like the FS7 or the previous Next cams. It just gives you that better image on here. When you're shoulder mount, when you're shooting in sunlight, it can be quite difficult. Now, XAVC-I isn't available on this camera, and that's due to the memory cards inside. But that is obsolete when you've got the Shogun, because you can record ProRes HQ straight into the SSD, and that's a 10-bit 4K 422, whereas the internal is 8-bit 420 color space. For me, that is a big thing when you've got the Shogun. Now, look, just to wrap it up, the FS5, it's a great camera, a great all-round camera. It's great for a single cam shoot because you can easily move it from one spot to another to get those different angles. You can shoot your main scenes and then go straight into your B-roll, and you can be done single cam pretty easily. When you put the RAW upgrade into the camera, yes, it does cost a fair amount, but it changes the camera to a totally different camera. It is such a worthy investment, and I really recommend it. Well, that's it for my Sony FS5 setup overview and how I use it. If you want to see more videos just like this on different setups, different gear that we use, as well as different ways to shoot things, make sure you subscribe and look out for more. See you next time.